tips for preparing your application. Next slide, please. Okay, so one really important thing I need to tell you all is that the competition period is open right now. So this presentation will look a little bit different than it has in previous years. I'm a bit limited in the specificity that I can talk about as far as project details or questions about your application specifically. Things I can discuss is all the information that is in the NOFO. We can talk about how to apply, the type of work we are looking to fund, and then and then I'll be able to direct you to the frequently asked questions document, which is something that is updated when I do presentations like this. We will be taking notes, so any questions that you ask will be added also to that document. It's basically like a running record, so anyone who's interested to apply for this in the future will be able to also see the questions that have been answered. If I don't get to something today, that FAQ document will be a great place to start. But I did want to just see if there were folks in the room who have received this grant before, because they'll be a great resource also to talk about. Yeah, go ahead, raise your hands. So if you're looking to put together an application, these are people you can, talk freely about with your project ideas or questions, things that I won't be able to answer, but the peer-to-peer sharing is a great opportunity to get a little bit more information. Okay, so now we're going to talk about just the Section 319 program. I'm not sure how many of you know all the details of it, so this will just be a couple quick slides. So as you probably know, the 319 awards, or EPA awards our Section 319 grants to tribes in two parts. So the base grants are awarded annually to all tribes that have that come in for the TAS for 319. And these range from 45 to 70K per tribe, depending on your land area. You probably all know this, but this is funding that supports all of your environmental programming work and running the program. And then any tribe that is eligible for a base grant is also eligible to apply for the competitive grant, which we're talking about today. And this can support on-the-ground BMP implementation and project work to implement your program documents. For both of these grants, base and competitive, the Clean Water Act requires that the 319 grants support activities on waters related to the reservation. So this can include off-reservation work, for example, working with upstream partners to address, impacts that you're seeing on your lands, but it has to be related to your reservation waters in some way or another. And of course, you all know this, but these are primarily provided through your regional offices. So I work at headquarters, but you all have regional project officers who help you with all the details. We have the Region 9 coordinators up here if you have questions on regional things. And so just a little bit more, actually, I'm gonna talk a little more about this funding. Okay, so you can see on the right-hand side, this pie chart, this is our average funding per year. And we've been working to increase the funding for this program in general in the past couple of years. So I like to pull out the bottom graph because you can see in, 2023, it jumped up from about $10 million to almost $14 million total for this pot. This is currently 7.6% of the total 319 allocations. So we get a big chunk of money, and then most of it goes to the states, and then we're working on increasing the percentage that is going towards the tribal programs. Our program has a long-term goal of 12% of that annual appropriation, which is what the 106 program provides you all. And once again, the allocation formula is based on land area. This data comes from the EPA Tribal Boundaries Survey, which is related to the census. That's data I am now pulling every year, and I have a table for it posted on our website. So if you have questions on that, I'm definitely happy to discuss that as well. So more specifically for the competitive grant, so this is what the trends we've been getting the past couple of years. We usually get around 40 applications, and we fund over half of them. So this is a really great opportunity to get funding. There's good chances that you will get funded because of just the numbers that we usually get for applications. And then since 2023, we've also been doing a new applicant set aside. So this is we set aside about funding for 5 projects to go to tribes that have not received a grant in the past 5 years. We are seeing trends of just a lot of similar tribes getting these grants annually. And so we wanted to create an opportunity for folks who hadn't come in for this program, either never or haven't gotten a successful application before, to have that opportunity to be involved in this pot of funding. So I have also a list of those that are eligible for that set aside is also on our website, so you can double check. So just once again, that's a great opportunity. If you haven't gotten this funding before, it's a good opportunity to get some experience writing this, and you'll have even better odds of getting funded. Let's see. Great, so now we're going to talk about what kind of fund projects we're looking to fund in this grant program. So we're looking to fund projects that will directly improve or protect water quality by implementing on-the-ground BMPs. This can be structural or non-structural. So structural are things like construction projects that are for riparian restoration. This can also be non-structural. Like I said, you can work with farmers to develop a nutrient management plan if this is something that you're struggling with. So it can be a variety of things can be funded under this program. But you should make sure to tie it all back to the direct water quality benefits. So if your application is focusing on something like water quality monitoring or assessments, that's something that's not going to be funded in this program. So it needs to all tie together to have some kind of final water quality improvement at the end of the project. And then number 2, we're looking for strategically targeted projects that are going to be addressing identified pollution problems or threats. You should try to make your application show that you've strategically targeted this particular area, have a plan for addressing things on a wider scale throughout your watershed, and connecting it all to some of the critical areas that you've identified in your program documents. And then finally, there should be a readiness to proceed that is demonstrated in this application. This proposal should not be contingent on other funding. You should be almost ready to do this project as soon as you receive this funding. So it should have a reasonable budget for this particular program, which we'll talk about more. It should have a project schedule that is achievable in the project timeframe, and then the project team should be already identified. There can be some, gaps if you need to identify a contractor, that can be something, but we like to know that you have staff that are going to be supporting this and staff that are going to be managing this grant. So make sure everything looks like it's ready to go as soon as you get this funding. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the actual Notice of Funding Opportunity, NOFO. So this is the document that is posted on grants.gov. This has all the information that you will need to put together an application. And I'm just going to walk through some of the high-level information and then some of the specific sections that will be useful for you to pay attention to. So as I mentioned, eligibility for this program, any tribe that is eligible to receive 319 base funding can come in for the competitive grant. I have a list, as I said already, of the currently eligible FY25 tribes on our website already. So go ahead and check that out. We have 217 this year. We had, I think, 4 come in this past year, which is great. So double check. How you do this, this document can be accessed on our tribal non-point source website. It'll just be the PDF, but you do need to submit it through grants.gov, and you can, of course, find the application NOFO on grants.gov. So that is where you all will find that. And then the deadline this year is December 11th, which is significantly sooner than it's been in the past. We were able to get this out a little bit sooner this year. So I'm glad that so many people are here. I was a little worried people were going to get caught surprised with this early release. And so here's just a more detailed timeline of what's going to happen throughout the rest of this FY25 competition period. In general, we accept questions for that FAQ document until 15 days before the application due date. So that will be November 26th. As I said, the application is due December 11th. And then it will go through the review processes. So this threshold review is where your regional points of contact will review the application, make sure you're proposing eligible activities, make sure there isn't anything that would disqualify you. And once you pass that, most applications pass that, usually there's no issues. Then it will pass on to the evaluation review stage, in which there's a review panel that will score your application out of 100 points. And we'll talk about those criteria in a minute. And then after that, we go through the EPA internal selection process, which just moves the selections to your region, and then the money will get out probably sometime in the summer or fall, but you will know, we'll make the announcements that the awards were selected sometime in the spring, but it will usually come with your regular grants whenever those happen. It does vary by region though, so don't quote me on that. Okay, just some key reminders. This is like standard for every year that we do this program. There is, of course, no match if you're putting this into a PPG, pretty standard for all these grants. 10% match if there's a hardship waiver requested. 40% match is the standard. I rarely hear about anyone having to do all of that, so I'm sure you have all the paperwork for either the PPG or the 10%. Funding-wise, you can request up to $125,000. You may request less, but you cannot request more. That is something that will disqualify you in that threshold stage. So if you request more, we won't be able to score it. That's just how this particular program is written. So be sure to request $125,000 or less. As I mentioned, there's the new tribal set-aside, and this year that's for FY20 through 24. It is so crazy to me that 2020 was 5 years ago, but that's the correct one, and we have the list, as I said, on the website. We still have a cover page requirement, so we have 15-page requirement in general, but we have a cover page requirement as well. I'm always trying to put emphasis on this. We have I'll show you the screenshot from the PDF of what needs to be on that cover page. Try to be efficient with your space because that does count towards the 15 pages. And then finally, as we've had in the past couple of years, we have a requirement in the grants terms and conditions to enter project data into our grants reporting and tracking system. This is very high-level information, like basically just from your application, things like just a project description and some budget information. So happy to talk more about that after this presentation. I also work on that. So if you have questions, we can dig into that requirement later. And so before we get into the important sections of the NOFO, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to zoom out and think about how you might want to approach putting together an application. So just starting at the top here, think about the big picture for your area. What are the issues you need to address? What's causing challenges? What are you trying to solve with this application? And then you're going to compare that vision of the problems to your program documents and your program goals. What have you identified in your non-point source management plan? And then how can those projects that you thought about in one connect to two on your landscape to meet these goals? So just kind of stepping down from very specific, just zooming out and making a big holistic picture of how this will all fit together. And then fourth, once you think about these projects and think about projects that are going to meet your goals, who can you bring on to help you with that? Who around you or who in your other tribal departments? I've been hearing about great forestry, water connections, transportation, water connections. Who else works, for your tribe or for neighboring, communities if the issue is off your reservation that you can bring on board to help make this project a success? And then finally, what is the best way to structure, potentially multiple projects to bring about the highest likelihood of success? So if you have a big problem, you might need to break it down into a couple steps. You might need to do a small project here and a small project here that add to a greater goal. You might need to do 2 competitive grants. Think about just ways to, take it in little chunks that are going to be the most successful, like the best success to address these water quality problems. I have this slide at the end again too, so if you want to keep thinking about it while we're going, we can touch on it again. Okay, so now I'm going to walk through a couple sections of the Notice of Funding Opportunity that I think are really important, either because they are a little tricky or maybe folks usually score a little bit lower in them. So I won't go through the whole thing. There is a recorded informational webinar in which I do walk through every single section on our website. So if you want to go through it with me talking as a recording, you can find that too. But we'll just go through the high-level sections right now. First off, there are no significant changes between FY24, so last year, and this year. So it should look very, very similar. As I mentioned, we got this out a bit sooner, so that was part of this. We basically just changed dates and updated some links. So everything should look exactly the same if you applied last year. But if you didn't apply last year, it will look very different from 2 years ago or earlier, because last year we updated the scoring criteria, and I have a table of those in 2 slides. So just be aware that if you haven't applied in a couple years, it will look a little different. So take a good read through this document if you haven't applied in a couple years. And then we're going to walk through the NOFO. So first off, the cover page. So this is what I mentioned. These are the required sections that we're asking you to put on your cover page. This is basically everything that we're also asking for to be put into the grants reporting and tracking system. So very high level. If you put it right on the cover page, it'll be very easy for you when you need to enter it in the fall. And then just be efficient with your space. So sometimes if you put any of these on one page, I have to count it as a page. So just try to keep everything together. If you put key contacts, your name, and the title on one page, that's going to count as one page. Even if you go to the next page, that's a lot of space that you set aside. So just be nice and efficient with the space for that 15-page limit. Okay, this got a little bit cut off, but there's 2 sections that I think will be really helpful to you. This is section 4. You can see right here, application submission information, and section 5. So I'm going to talk through those. This is the table of contents for the NOFO, just a direct screenshot, so it'll look exactly like it will when you open the document. I'm skipping through sections 1, 2, and 3. These are like eligibility, like we already talked about, program funding information, things that I already talked about, but we don't need to talk through specifically. So then we'll just talk about section 4 and section 5. Section 4 is the application submission information. So this is where it's talking about how to submit it on grants.gov. This is where it's discussing with you what to include in your application package. So as far as EPA required documents or forms, that will be in this section. And then there's some information on formatting your application and what to include for each of the ranking criteria. So there's details about what information you need to include to address the criteria. I will say that the NOFO outlines specific information to include on these, but it doesn't tell you how to format it specifically. You can submit whatever format you like, but it could be helpful to follow this section as you're writing it. It could just be a good way for you to organize your thoughts, because this is also how the reviewers will be scoring it. So they'll also be reading it as the NOFO is formatted. So that can be a great way to just keep yourself organized, make sure that the reviewers can find the information that they need. But it's not required. You can type it however you want to type it. And then section 5 is the application review information. So if 4 was telling you what you needed to include for each criteria, 5 is telling you how the reviewers will be scoring it. So it's a little bit different, but both of them go hand in hand to help you write a nice complete section that will address each of the criteria. There's also information in this section about how we will select the applications. Basically, it is a ranked list, and we start at the top of the list and go top down until we don't have any funding left. And this does mean that you could potentially get partial funding, or if you have ineligible activities, you could also only be funded for a part of your application. Okay, so now probably what you all came for is to look at the evaluation criteria. So these are the new criteria that we have. They're very similar to what they used to be. Basically, we've streamlined them and just reorganized them a little bit for ease of writing and for reviewing these applications. I'm going to just spend a couple minutes running through the specifics of the last 5 of these criteria. Like I said, these are the ones that are maybe a little bit tricky or have some tricky language in them. So I'll just bring your attention to some of those details. So criteria 3, this is project goals and environmental results. This is the criteria where the reviewers are evaluating the goals of your project. Is this project work linked to the pollution problems that you've addressed and described in some of the previous criteria? Because the first criteria are project location and pollution problems. So those are the sections that everybody always has a great handle on. You know what's going on, you know where you want to put a project. And so as you go forward, then you need to connect it all together. So think about what the goal is and how it's going to address those problems that you identified. Is this a priority in your management plan is part of this criteria. Also, these are just screenshots exactly from the NOFO, so if you want to see them and take your time reading them, you can download the document. I didn't want to break it up too much because I figured you would want to know exactly what it looked like. So if you can discuss your management plan and how this project ties into that, that's a great way to show the reviewers that there's a holistic vision for your program and that your implementation plans are really strategic. You're thinking about where things should be and when they should go on the ground. This criteria also includes grant-specific language. So these are things that have to be in all EPA grants. So like if something's a little bit tricky in these NOFOs, you can almost bet that that's required language that everyone has to put in. So for example, these outputs and outcomes are always tripping people up because it is confusing. Even I get a little tongue-tied sometimes on these. But this is thinking about what is coming out of this project. So your outputs are your quantifiable results. So this is like 25 feet of fencing. And then your outcomes are what's going to happen because of it. You can say, I put in 25 feet of fencing and that kept out the cows and we saw the spring regenerate. That spring regeneration is the outcome, the result. And then there's some language in here about the EPA strategic plan and as well as measuring and tracking progress. So those are things that you have to mention in this application for you to get full points on this criteria. This is a required grants thing. Just make sure that you tie it all together. There's like a specific goal in the strategic plan for our program. Just have a couple sentences about how you think this project will relate to that, and you'll be able to, check off that part of this criteria. Same with measuring and tracking progress. That's also a question that is always going to be in this NOFO. So think about how you're going to, track that progress over the project period. Just how are you going to know it's successful? And just it doesn't have to be super specific. Just have, a general idea of how you might go about that. Okay, and then criteria 4 is project work plan. So we collapsed some of the information from other criteria in previous years to have this all together. So hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to write for you all. And the way to go about this is to break down your work plan into really specific tasks. Could a new staff person pick up this work plan and recreate this project? The most common feedback that we get from reviewers is that there's not enough detail. So when you're putting together your work plan and your budget, this should be detailed enough for the reviewers to assess the reasonableness of the plan, understand if this is a good time frame to complete this work, and understand if it's going to address the problems that you've been discussing in your application. Also in this criteria, you should make sure to identify who's keeping track of each task, who's the lead person for these, and who is going to be advancing each component of it. You want to include details also on timing, including interim milestones. What are you looking for 6 months into it? What are you looking for 1 year into it? Keep it as detailed as you possibly can. And then again, there's some required grant information in here too. So be sure to include a statement on spending the funds in a timely and efficient manner, which I know is very jargony, but just make sure you say that you're going to be tracking the funding for this project, who's going to be keeping track of that, and how it will be timely. You can't receive full points for this if you do not include that. So I know that's kind of confusing, and maybe you personally as the environmental staff don't know how to do that, but check in with your financial folks and just have a couple sentences on how you'll be tracking grants in general. And then criteria 6 is project budget, and criteria 7 is past performance. These are kind of linked together, so I'll just have them both on the slide for you. Again, the budget should be detailed enough that reviewers can assess the reasonableness and the cost of the proposed work, and you should try to match the level of detail that you put into the work plan. So if you have the work plan into 10 tasks, it would be the best if you could also have 10 task costs for your budget, if possible. I know that it's a little bit difficult to do that, but as detailed as you can with the budget will be really helpful for your reviewers. And then just a general reminder on the budget is you can request less than 125, but it will not be able to be reviewed if you request more than 125,000. And then past performance is, again, one of these grant-specific things that the EPA needs to know about how you've been doing managing previous grants. And I know that this sounds intimidating, but it can be also pretty general. So we do not need details on what that project was or what happened. We're looking for a statement on how you reported and tracked the progress towards your expected results. So you can just say, some sentences as far as we have been doing our grant reporting. We closed it out on time. We are in the middle of this one, but are expecting to finish on time. Things about the timing of that actual grant, not necessarily the results or outcomes of that grant, because of course you're managing so many grants in it, and we don't need to know the specifics of all of them. We just need to know that you're prepared to manage another grant in addition to the grants you've reviewed in the past, or managed in the past, sorry. And we actually changed this last year to expand from the past 3 years to the past 5 years. Hopefully this will give you a little more flexibility to talk about grants that you've closed out successfully, projects that you have finished on time. We know that 3 years is a bit narrow for some of the grants that you all are managing. So hopefully 5 years will be helpful there. And we also don't need a list of every single grant you've managed. We're asking for grants that are similar in scope to this one. So things that are BMP implementation focused. So we don't need to necessarily know about education grants or things that aren't on the ground work. So think about that, and hopefully that will help you. Just make some notes, and it can be short. This can be one of the shorter sections. We don't need a ton of detail, but we do need to know that you're managing these grants successfully. And then finally, this is the last criteria I'll talk about. We're jumping a bit back up. This is to criteria 5. This is a new criteria. This is, we're looking for information on the BMPs that you chose for this project. We know that you might not have your designs completed, but we just want to know why you chose or why you're interested to implement a particular BMP. Why do you think it's going to be addressing your non-point source problem the most effectively? And just because there's so many BMPs, we want to know that you're thinking about which one you're selecting strategically, and that you're putting something in the ground that is going to make sense for the particular problem that you're seeing. And then we also have a sub-criteria here that is asking you to consider how changes in your local climatic conditions, less rain, more rain, bigger storms, things like that, how those will impact this particular project. Are you scaling this project up a little bit to think about things that might happen in the next 5 years? That would be great to know. We want to make sure that these BMPs are going to be successful over their lifespan. And then there's a question at the end here about how are you planning to maintain the BMP over its lifespan. So this is generally 10 years, and so that can kind of tie into the climate change question. So are you making this a little bit bigger and then making sure to maintain it so it's still giving you the performance that you're looking for when addressing these problems? Okay, so those are the sections I was going to walk through for you. And then we'll just run through just a couple best practices. So we talked about this slide at the beginning, of course. And so I just wanted to put it up here again. In light of walking through the application, you can kind of see that the NOFO is structured like this as well. You're thinking about where you're putting something on the ground and what the problem is. You're thinking about how you're going to achieve that. That's your work plan. How's it going to happen? Who's going to be working on the work plan? And then thinking about what this project might lead to in the future or how this project ties into the rest of your work. So hopefully something like this will help you take a big picture view of these applications. It doesn't have to be so specific. It can be part of your program work. And then just wanted to give you some tips to think about while you're writing this application. So first of all, and for any application, make sure that it's the right funding opportunity for what you're looking for. There are some really specific eligibility rules for our grant program. So just make sure to read those. Those are also in the notice of funding opportunity. So read through those and make sure that this is one is going to fit for the problem that you're seeing. Don't get, let's see. Take it back to the big picture. So think about what we were just saying. Think about how it's going to fit in on your landscape, how this is going to be part of a broader long-term plan for your work and for your non-point source program in general. Don't get creative with the application format. As I said, you can submit it any way that you want to, but the reviewers are going to be following a rubric that is based on the NOFO. So if you can write it as similarly to the funding opportunity, that's a great way to just ensure that the reviewers can find everything that they're looking for. But of course, it's not required. You can write it however you would like to. That's just a tip. Describe and show with photos, maps, graphs, the problem. It's a great way to bring reviewers to your landscape, to show them what you're working on, to really show the extent of a problem. I've seen some shocking photos that it wasn't coming across in the narrative, but when I saw it, I was like, oh, I didn't know what 20 feet of bank looked like eroded, but now I'm seeing that you standing next to this huge bank is very serious. So some of the reviewers also, I'll say down here as well, aren't familiar with this program. So these can be from anywhere in EPA. So try to think about how you can use photos to also give them information on where you are, what the issues are. And then coming down here, EPA likes data, of course, like all federal agencies. And so if you have data available, water quality data to support your claims, that's great. But as we've been hearing about, and the theme of this whole conference is, TEK, there's a lot of ways of knowing that things aren't going right in your lands and in your waters. And so we have language in our scoring that also encourages you to incorporate things like that. So if the elders used to swim in a particular location, but nobody swims there now, that's great evidence as well. That is data in the eyes of this application as well. So just think about that. It's really powerful to know how you know about things. So that is an option there. I know that everybody doesn't have water quality data, so that's why we've been trying to expand that, what we qualify there. As I mentioned, most reviewers are not from EPA, so just think about being really clear in your descriptions. If they don't, they're not from our program, they're usually from EPA. Sometimes we have other agency reviewers, but they're either new or not in our program. So just try to describe things as best you can for a new reviewer. As I've said 100 times, stick to the page limit. If it goes over 15 pages, I have to redact it. If it's anything that has a scoring criteria or a scoring value on it and it's over the 15 pages, I have to cut it off. It happens a couple times every year and I'm always like so torn, but that is the way that the NOFO is written. So just double check your page limits and that will be good. You want everything to be scored that you have prepared. And then finally, I put a star by the debriefing. This is if you take nothing else away from this, just know that I am happy to debrief either successful or unsuccessful or successful applicants. I've had some great conversations with folks who have been successful but wanted to know additional details. This is a way that you can request for me, the competition chair, to sit down with you. I usually set the meetings for 45 minutes, and I will prepare notes on all the reviewers' scorings. And then you'll be able to get some feedback directly from me on how that application scored. It can be great if you're unsuccessful, but I think also if you're successful and plan to apply in the future, it's just really good to get feedback. So you can request that directly from me or through your regional coordinator, whichever you're more comfortable with if you end up applying. And yeah, I think that's it actually. So perfect 15 minutes for questions. As I mentioned, we are a little limited in the specificity of what we can answer, but we'll do the best we can. Also,
Hello.
This is my email address.
We have a question online.
Okay.
And so this is from Sarah Schaefer. She says, can water quantity be addressed as well as water quality? For example, off-channel habitat for juvenile salmonids.
Yeah. Can I answer this? Okay. Howard Kahn, everybody, knows so much about all of these things as far as what I can and can't say. Yes, I think that is an example of a project that would be fine under this this program. I guess it would depend a little bit on how you're going about ensuring the quantity is staying at the correct levels, but if that's something like, habitat restoration or woody debris installation, that is something that qualifies. I'm not sure if that answered the question fully, but.
Yeah, I have two quick questions. I'm not sure if I missed it, but if we currently have an NPS assessment report and management plan that is in review, are we eligible for this funding? And two, I noticed that the deadline in the NOFO is December 11th, but I also noticed that it asked for everything to be submitted a week before in case of any submission issues. So is that December 11th the deadline, or is it encouraged to get it in beforehand?
Yeah, good questions. The December 11th is the deadline. I think that encouragement in the NOFO is like grants.gov standard language, just to make sure that nothing technical happens, but that's not a deadline for me. So December 11th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. So you have the whole entire day to submit that. And then the first question was, if you have a report and assessment in review. It depends on if you're doing an update or if this is your initial review period. Probably not this year because the deadline for TAS has passed, but you will qualify for next year. But we can talk more specific so I can understand your situation.
Mike Shiver, Powder Valley Tribe. Hey, Jen. First, I just have a comment. Great presentation, good insights on some of the output and outcomes differences, VMP, technical merit. But I was disappointed that it seemed like you're tying to the EPA strategic plan and not, as the woman just before me had mentioned, that not required non-point source management plan. As I described to the tribe with the effort we were putting it together, that this was required for the funding. And I thought in previous guidance documents you had to have, like, we made an effort to include the projects we might see in the future in there. So it didn't seem like you had any requirement for your projects to be in the non-point source plan of the tribe, which I guess I would like to see that connection in the future. But my question is, you mentioned the readiness of the project, which is always good. And in my baseline 319, we usually keep to putting a silt fence in, some wattles, seeding, things that don't initiate ground disturbance. We're just responding to a tribe's disturbance project or existing environmental disturbances. The competitive grants, usually we look at something a little bit more significant in the environment, putting riprap in a stream section, putting in a new culvert during an erosion section. Those things would be ground disturbance, would they not, I would think, require NEPA. So does this grant allow the cost of that permit, and do they understand the timeline that might require for ground disturbing in 319 grants?
Yeah, that is a great question. And we've had some presentations on permitting in the past. I think there's this is considered a small program.
So
Here.
Hi, so I'm Howard. I work in Region 9. So for the NEPA question, for the 319 headquarters, these projects don't trigger the NEPA process. So that wouldn't be on that part. If there is permitting that's needed for your project, that's an eligible cost that can be funded through the competitive or the base grant if it's just a base 319 project.
In California, we might have to do CWA, so that'd be something, but hopefully not. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I also have some resources on, I can connect you to some people who've done kind of extensive permitting if you have like the state permits. Yeah, I don't know the details on the NEPA thresholds, but yeah, that's a good question. And then the first question was about the strategic plan. Could I go back a couple slides? Oh, thanks. So the strategic plan language is grant required, but we do still have language in here about right here in subcriteria A. So we are still looking for the connection with the non-point source management plan. the reviewers won't be reading your management plan. So if you can describe how this project, if the specific project is in there, that's awesome. That will be really good for scoring of this criteria. So it is still really important to connect this to your program documents, but unfortunately, that strategic plan language right here is required. But it can be pretty high level. So spend more time thinking about your program documents. They are the most important guiding documents for you. We just need to know that it's a little bit connected to the strategic plan. Yep.
So I just wanted to go over the timing again. So you said that the awards would be announced in March or April of 2025, but then when does the actual funding come? Does it come right after that, or do we have to wait until the start of the next fiscal year in October?
So the start date for your project should not be any sooner than fall of 25. That is correct. The timeline will vary based on the regional processing of your documents. So the funding could come, and also depending on the congressional budget, but funding could come to you, sometime between, let's say, May and end of September, but it will definitely come before October 1st.
And then what about the length of the project? Is it supposed to be 1 year, or can it be longer than that?
I think it can be longer than that. Yeah. I didn't do a lot of work plan management, so.
Yeah, hi, I'm Larry Moore, and I'm one of the regional coordinators along with Howard. I just wanted to mention, usually the non-point source competitive grants are awarded on the same timeline as your 106 or 319 base grants. So we just recommend working with your project officer to see when that award is actually going to happen. Most tribes, their projects they start October 1st, and they'd be a 1-year period. There are some tribes that start July 1st, and we can do that award usually if you want to start your project July 1st. So I would say between July 1st and October 1st, and just to work with your project officer on the project timeframe.
Okay, so if we have,
I think most projects we've done have been 1 year. I think there is some flexibility to do longer. Is that something you've seen, Margot? Okay.
Yeah, it kind of depends. And of course, this is just the application. And so just as Larry was saying, like, you'll work more with your project officer once you get selected. So you can iron out the details of the timeline. And I think the times where I've seen it be a little longer is if there's like reasons you can't access, a certain area, like if there's some seasonality and you need it like the end of the project to happen after the summer or something. I'm like not certain on what that specificity would be, but I have seen it, I think. I will also just add something that Larry asked me to do was to make sure that you're communicating with your project officers as you're applying. So there's a lot of staff in Region 9 who maybe we don't want to surprise them that you're getting this extra money. So it's great if you can just give them a heads up that you're applying. That can kind of make the work plan negotiations go a little smoother in the summer if they're ready to put this extra money into the grant program.
Well, I was going to say the other thing, if there are permits required, that definitely between the season and the permits could push it off.
You mentioned a priority process when you're reviewing, and at this stage, was that by dollar amount requested?
I don't think I have any notes on this, but it's so he asked if there was how the priority was going, if it was ranked by dollar amount. It will be ranked by the score that you receive from the reviewers. So the reviewers will score each application so this adds up to 100. So you'll get a score, and then we rank them at the end, highest scoring to lowest scoring. We do that new applicants set aside first. So we'll pull the ones we want to fund from that, and then we will go to the top of the list and continue down, basically until we get to the end of our funding pot, which is usually around 3.5 million.
Thank you.
Hey.
Hi,
Hi.
Margaret. Question. For the project location, how detailed do you have to be with, like, for the online people, how detailed do you have to be for the location? Do you have to provide Latin long, or is it just like a general?
Yeah, I wish I
area?
had the write-up for you on this. It's not Latin long, and there is some specific language in the scoring criteria about it. I think we ask for the type of water body, its relationship to other important like road crossings or buildings, like kind of just setting the scene for what the issue is and where it is. We don't ask for Latin long. We don't ask for anything as specific as like this stream reach or anything like data specific as far as the water body. It's mostly like, where are you going to put this in relation to things around it?
Oh, gotcha. Okay,
So pretty narrative.
thank you. And then just, can you clarify again what's a part of the 15-page limit? I know I've had issues before, so.
Yes. Great question. So anything that is scoreable counts towards the 15-page limit. So for example, extra budget tables, if a budget table is over the 15-page limit, we can't score it. If there's information on, let's see, if you have like a really long work plan that maybe goes over the page limit, I can have to truncate it. Things that do not count towards the page limit are any photos. So you can make the supplementary materials as long as you want. This is photos, this is maps. This is BMP technical designs. So even though we're asking for technical merit, that's the description of it. You can include the diagrams if you really need to. Probably not necessary for the scoring, but if that would not count towards the page limit. I'm trying to think of what else. Yeah, so basically anything that has a score associated with it will have to be counted towards the page limit.
Plus the cover page.
Plus the cover page. Yep.
All right,
Well,
thank you.
and some of this information, yeah, just as long as you include the cover page information, it can kind of look however you want. So like this could just be the top of a page and then you could start writing right below it. Like nothing says that you have to have it set off. Yeah, we just need to have this information included somewhere on it.
Great, thank you.
Does it say what size font it has?
It does, yes, unfortunately, 12 point single spaced. We have had some I have had to hem and haw over landscape versus portrait before, but I don't think that landscape actually gets you any additional words. So I think 15 pages is 15 pages. Maybe just one more question if there's any. I know I just got the 2-minute. Well, I'm happy to discuss more, and you saw that there's a couple folks in the room who've gotten this grant, so definitely encourage you to seek them out, and good luck. And if you need to email any questions, I check this Tribal 319 grants email address also every day, and I'm the one putting those into the FAQ document, so that's where you'll find those. Thank you.